We're on YouTube. We're live? Not yet.
Yeah, we are live.
We're
We're
live.
live now.
Okay, we're live now. So you can go ahead and open the Zoom meeting. Let's get people in. Okay, we're getting started. We're getting the first attendance. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Doing well, Pedro. How are you?
Good, good. Hello, Luani. How's everything? Everything fine?
Yes, perfect.
Okay,
Hi.
good, good. We have two great panelists today. Just giving you a couple more minutes so people can come in. It's 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Brazil, and then 5 o'clock somewhere else. We have attendance from all over the world. I will not guess the time here, just Brazilians and Americans now. Guys, I thank you very much, Mike and Loani, for being here. We also have Mila. Mila is the Global Development Manager and Coordinator for Invest America. She'll be here with us on the background, helping on selecting questions, answers, and etc. If you people have questions in English, type in English. If you have in Portuguese, type in Portuguese. If you have in Spanish or any other language, type in any other language and we'll take care of you. Mila will help us on that as well. We also have Aline Ribeiro, which is from our communication department at Drummond. She always do a great job. She's on the background also helping. An additional topic here for the assistance. Today we have live translation to Portuguese. Okay, if you prefer to hear this webinar in Portuguese, go ahead, and the bottom of your screen should have a symbol, like a little earth. You just click there and you can choose live translation, ok? Em português, só para falar da tradução, pessoal, para quem preferir ouvir o webinar em português, a gente tem o tradutor simultâneo, tá? Hoje quem está conosco é o João Paulo. Muito obrigado, João Paulo. A gente tem essa tradução live, né, automática e tradução simultânea para português. Nós vamos conduzir o webinar inicialmente em inglês, tá bom? Okay, going back to English and to get started. Today we have Mike Zenik, President CEO of Invest America, and Loani Cesario, my colleague here at Drummond, our Senior Associate, Head of Global Mobility. She takes care of all the business and family immigration here. Specialized in business immigration, and today we'll be talking about investing and immigrating. Guys, great topic. We get a lot of questions on this matter. It generates a lot of interest, and we'll be talking about this topic for the next hour. We have 1 hour reserved. Please send your questions and answers. Don't be shy. Send your questions and we'll take them at the end, okay? Everybody hear me well? Mike, you can hear me well? Luan, you can hear me well? Okay, so let's get going. Just a quick introduction on us, on Drummond. We are a multidisciplinary firm. We specialize in cross-border transactions. We have clients all over the world, although most of our clients are Americans and Brazilians. We have 4 main line of businesses, which are down here. Accounting and tax, legal services. I'm the head of this legal segment, and Loani is within the legal segment. We have the immigration department, the global mobility, and Loani coordinates that segment. We also have consulting services and venture services, where we specialize in helping companies to be prepared to international fund. We are a team of accountants and lawyers, both dual licensed and experienced in Brazil and the U.S. Offices in Boston, New York, Miami, Orlando, São Paulo, and Belo Horizonte. I'm today in Boston. Loan is in Miami. Mike, where are you now? Just to give a sense of where we all are. You in Georgia?
I'm in Tampa, Florida.
Oh, you're in Tampa, Florida today. Great. So we are all over, guys, and our clients are also spread around the world. We have more than 10 years of experience and more than 3,000 clients served. We count on 170 employees across those 5 offices. Next, let's talk a little bit about Invest America. Mike, feel free to introduce the company and yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Pedro. Invest America is a immigration consulting firm based in Charleston, South Carolina, through our affiliate company, Sequence Financial Specialists, which is a securities broker-dealer regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So our threshold is very high when it comes to protecting investors, protecting all of our clients. As you see here, our main purpose is to guide, protect, and support families as they immigrate to America. And we take that very seriously, both because we want to make sure there's successful outcomes, as well as to make sure that we are doing things in compliance with U.S. securities laws and making sure that the investors are protected throughout their journey, regardless of what path they take, and most specifically focused on the investments that they make. I've been doing EB5 since 2010 and started Invest America in 2012. We have grown substantially since then. As Pedro mentioned, we've got people in different places: South Carolina, Atlanta, Florida, Los Angeles, Minnesota, London, and India, and Mumbai, and Nigeria. So we are continuing to expand our focus there and utilizing those expertise in each of those markets to help people. We provide services to in the EB5 space and the E-2 space. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, and also in the EB1-C space. And the thing that makes us different is than, say, other EB5 agents or other people promoting projects is we do extensive due diligence to comply with U.S. securities laws, but as I mentioned before, mainly to protect investors, because we're only successful if the investors are successful. And we have a reputation to uphold, and we also want to make sure that we are doing right by our clients. So our focus is, before we present anything for investment, is extensive due diligence and making sure that the people that we are representing on that side and that the investors are investing alongside have extremely reputable backgrounds. We do deep background checks and deep analysis of all the things that we put out there. So we are, and I guess the last thing that sort of makes us unique also is that because we're securities broker dealers, once we bring an investor into an investment, they become our client for the duration of their investment. So from the moment they invest until the moment that they exit the investment, we are there for them and have to represent their interests. So thank you for that, and looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks. And you guys do a great job, and you really add value when we're talking about immigration, because we, as licensed attorneys on immigration, we focus on the legal and regulatory aspect of the operation in terms of petitioning to the USCIS. And it's very important to have investing consulting services together with us to guide the applicant with respect to the best investment to make. Loani and I will always focus on the legal side from a immigration perspective, and client must know the good investment to make. Okay, so thank you very much for being here with us. Loani, introduce yourself, please, before we move into the first slide, and then I will present the 3 topics that we'll talk and we'll start chat. Okay.
Sure. So I am Loani Cesario. As Pedro mentioned, I'm located in Miami, Florida. I focus in immigration. We're expanding here to global mobility services, but our main focus is business immigration and family immigration to the United States. I am a licensed attorney in Brazil and in New York in the United States. and it is my passion to deal with immigration.
Yeah, I know very well. Thank you very much, Loani. So guys, let's get started. Let me move to the next slide, and let me start by saying that I will not be with slides all the time. We're gonna have a conversation here about the main aspects, so everybody should feel free to ask questions, okay? But just to give an idea, just to give a sense of what we'll be talking here, in immigration to the US has several paths, okay? You can go on extraordinary abilities, you can do family immigration, etc. But you can also do investment and looking for immigration through investments. Those three are the main types, okay? E2, EB1-C, and EB5. Let me move this here for you to see, guys, the EB5. We'll be talking about those three, and Mike and Loani will explore the pros and cons, the differences and similarities among those three, okay? What I want to point out is that investing in the US must be somehow linked to a productive project, okay? It must benefit the US economy. So if I have $100 million and I want to buy $100 million in Apple shares, okay, I will go to the stock market and buy $100 million in shares. Can I immigrate? No, you cannot. Okay. Oh, I want to buy a $10 million apartment. Can I use that investment to immigrate to the US? No, you cannot. But there are several other aspects that you can, several other alternatives that you can use, but mainly by investing on something that will create jobs that are productive businesses. So E2, I'll give the main idea. E2, it's an investment and it's a visa through establishing your own entity. EB1-C, you immigrate by acquiring an existing US company. And EB5, you immigrate through a passive investment. You invest in a project that will in turn create jobs on your behalf. Let's start with the E2. And Loani, may I ask you to get started from an immigration perspective? Give us an overview of what the E2 is.
Okay, most definitely. So E2 is actually one of my favorite visas right after extraordinary ability because I do like hard work. E2s are a great option, alternative to those who have the nationality through a treaty that allows these people to invest at risk in the United States and be able to come temporarily. Usually it varies by nationality, but usually for up to 5 years. And they could be extended indefinitely as long as the business continues to grow and to be a viable business here in the United States. The beauty of the E2 is it's your own creation, it's your own investment, it's your own passion, and you just convince immigration that that's a good business plan, right? The first question that everyone asks is how much? And that is actually the $1 million question because it will vary depending on which consulate you're actually applying. As the regs itself, they don't establish a minimum or a maximum amount to be invested. However, it does need to be substantial, and determining what substantial is key to understanding if that investment will actually work and get you there through an E2 application. Some of the most famous or common nationalities to apply for E2s are usually from Europe, but we do have a very long list of countries that do have treaties with the United States. Some of them are even in Latin America. Brazil, which is one of our countries of focus, does not have one, but lots of Brazilians, Latins. They do have European nationalities. They have dual nationalities, and that means they can apply for the E2.
Okay, great. So again, guys, E2 is a brand new entity that you create on your own. It's your investment, your baby. You create the entity and you request a visa. Mike, from a business and investing perspective, what an investor, what an individual should be focusing at when he's considering E2, what he should be looking for?
Well, as Luani said, definitely want to make sure that you're investing a substantial amount. That typically we've seen that range from, it can be lower, but we've seen sort of, as long as you're kind of in the $150,000 range, you're safe there from what we've seen. What we typically do and what we typically focus on is helping people to make sure that when they invest in something, they're investing in something that's going to be sustainable, a business plan, a business model that's going to be sustainable. Because as Luani said, you can get approved for, if USCIS or the consulate believes that your business is viable for E2 through the business plan that you submit, that's great for approval. But when you come up for renewal, you have to make sure that business is still around. You have to make sure you're profitable. You have to make sure you are employing a few U.S. people there, and you've got a plan to do that. Again, not in the regs, but something that we've seen, depending again on who the reviewer is, that's going to make a difference. So what we tend to focus on, and when you say it's got, this is an investor's own entity, that is true, and you can accomplish it, and we've helped people accomplish it 3 different ways. One is you do start your own business from scratch. It's your own business. It's something that you've capitalized yourself, that you put everything together yourself. That's one way. The other way is
you may acquire as well.
You may acquire an existing business that qualifies. That takes a little bit of the risk out of it in the sense that it's already shown to be a viable business. And you can, in fact, sometimes you can almost get away with not submitting a business plan as long as you can show that the business, it has been has had activity, whether it's showing, bank statements or other things, tax returns that will show USCIS this business that you're buying has been in business, it's viable. You can show the employee payroll, those kinds of things. And then the third way is to start a new location of an existing franchise. So you can partner with a franchise that has a good business model, that has been around for a while, has lots of successful franchisees, and they're looking to expand in whatever area you're looking to move to. And you can become a franchisee with those particular franchises. We can help with all 3 of those models, and again, our focus being due diligence, making sure that regardless of which you select, that the business is viable, is sustainable, and can maintain the qualification once it comes up for renewal.
Okay. Great point that Mike made about the renewal. The business must be viable. Okay, the regulation states that the return should be more than marginal. It doesn't state the exact numbers, but what's most important is that the business must be viable, because at some point in time you will renew this visa. I always tell clients, if you have a good business, you will have a good visa. Loani, what's your take on that when clients look for us and say, listen, I want to establish a business in the US through E2. What's the main legal advice that you usually provide so people can pay attention to that topic, to that point specifically?
Of course, it is very important to have experts like Mike, because as attorneys, we like legislation, but we're horrible with numbers sometimes. But we do check all that's related to the break-even point or hirings, the cost, the operational cost itself, right? And our analysis can vary depending on what's the origin of the E2. As Mike said, we could have 3 different types of E2s. It may be a franchise, it may be a purchase of an existing business in the United States, or a brand new startup, right? And our analysis can be a little bit different depending on what type it is, but we're always trying to see if that client really understands the business. Like, what are the marketing actions I'm going to take? Am I really compromising to do those? If I'm claiming that my first step is to be very aggressive in sales, am I hiring salespeople? What are my milestones? And if I'm saying I'm going to flip homes in the United States, I can't invest only $80,000, right? I have to invest a bigger amount, because that won't make sense with the average. Is it of course, is it a consulting business? Then the stakes are a little bit lower, right? I basically need my brain and some other things to assist me on the way. So in a very general sense, that's how we guide the client, and that's what we look at to see if the business is actually viable and it makes sense.
We mentioned that Brazilians, as a rule, will not have access to E2 because Brazil is not part of a treaty with the US for E2 purposes. However, many Brazilians have dual citizenships, like Italian citizenship or Spanish, and etc. But tell us what needs to be performed for that person to apply. So let's assume I'm a Brazilian and Italian. I will use my Italian citizenship for E2, but I need to own and control the business, correct? I cannot be a minority partner in that business for E2 purpose, correct?
You are right. That is very important. And sometimes we need to take a little bit more time to explain this concept, because it's sometimes not too clear for people with more nationalities what actually controlling, having ownership and control over an entity really means. To make everyone's life easier, we usually say 51% and over, right?
Mm-hmm.
To make we need assistance with math, right? So we like to make our life simple. So 51% plus is usually what we recommend. The scenario can vary depending on how many Italians are involved, right? And then we have to assess what substantial investment from each will actually mean.
Good. Guys, let me go to EB1-C. So we spoke about E2, that can be a brand new entity. So I want to immigrate, I want to work. E2 is not an immigration visa, it's a work visa. We will explain a little bit about the differences. And we have a very good question. We have a question about B1 versus E2. We will answer at the end from Luciano. Luciano, hold there, because you will understand more details as we go. And at the end, we will come back to your question, which is very interesting. But let's move to EB1-C. So we talked about E2, how E2 can be recently established. Now we go to EB1-C, which cannot be recently established. Okay, it must be a company that's existing already in the country. Let me go back to this to the slide presentation just to guide us here. So EB1-C, immigrate by acquiring an existing company. If the company is already existing and it's part of your group, it's an affiliated of your existing company in Brazil, you don't need to acquire. Okay, what we are stating here by acquisition is you work in a managerial or executive capacity in a company in Brazil, and instead of establishing a new affiliated business, you acquire a business in the US. Okay, then you can go straight to EB1-C. Loane, from a immigration perspective, can you explain to us a little bit about the EB1-C? What's the context on that?
Of course. So the EB1-C is already a permanent type visa, seeking a permanent type position here in the United States. When you do acquire an existing business, similarly to what we explained on the E2, when you purchase, for instance, an existing business here, and what Mike mentioned, you have good payroll, you have taxes, revenue, you have the immaterial value of the brand itself, right? And you have a lot of numbers to show, because one of the key elements to the EB1-C, on top of the business being already existent in the United States for at least 12 months prior to the application for that manager or executive, is that it has the ability to pay for the wages proposed to this executive, right? And usually executives have somewhat of a high salary. They're an asset to the company, and they're going to add to the operational costs of the company. So basically, that's a very good option, because when you're just starting off in the country, it's very hard to reach that point where you're very comfortable with your numbers, when you have a good amount of U.S. workers in your payroll, when you have revenue, when you have the geographic location very well established, which is one of the key strategic decisions that you make to come to the United States.
And we will get to a question, very interesting question, on the difference between L1A or B and EB1-C. I will save that question for later. I still have this slide on screen so people can pay attention to something very important. This is for those seeking to work in the US in a managerial or executive capacity. Okay, that's important, guys. That position needs to have a managerial or executive capacity. Okay, that mirrors the definitions of L1A. We will be talking about this later on. But let me shift to Mike. Mike, we spoke about E2, where you can establish a brand new company and request an E2. When someone is establishing a new company, that person will look, for example, for location or for the investment that he needs to make to get going, get started, first cost, etc. On EB1-C, the company needs to be existing before for at least 1 year, and we'll talk. So if I'm acquiring an existing company for EB1-C, what should be looking for? What the investor should be looking for?
Well, what we've focused on when we were helping people look for EB1-C qualifying companies is that they have enough managerial levels within the business to qualify. So, that's why it's going to be typically a more substantial business. It's probably going to cost more than an E2. It can be, if everything's structured properly, a quicker path to a green card than an EB5, just depending on whether the business already exists and all the different things that need to occur. But we're talking about probably a business that has that's already been in existence for quite some time, that has a reasonable amount of revenue, reasonable amount of profit, and if you're going to acquire a business like that, you're probably going to be spending, where I was mentioned before, E2, you're talking about a $150,000, minimum level. you can't, it would be very unusual to find a business that qualifies for EB1-C at that level. So you're talking probably at least, 750,000 to $1 million or more for a business to qualify for that. That's going to be, again, substantial enough to be able to demonstrate to U.S. immigration that the business meets all the qualifications, has the different managerial levels that are and executive levels that are required, which also means that you're having to do more due diligence. You're having to with more, the bigger the company becomes, the more moving parts there are, and obviously you're looking at your universe of businesses also decreases in what you have available. We also are looking for a company that's got that nexus with the international component of this transaction. It's got to have some affiliation with that international business. So that's another criteria to think about when considering the acquisition. So it's a much more comprehensive transaction than an E2. It's just it has some of the same characteristics in the sense you want to make sure it's viable, you want to make sure it's profitable, but at the same time, it's a much more complicated transaction most of the time.
Sure. Loani, let me get back to you with a very interesting question here that I want to pick this question now, not save for later, because this is very interesting in terms of the processing time and how EB1-C is processed in comparison to E2. So where can I apply for E2 and where must I apply for EB1-C? Because that answer makes a lot of difference in terms of time.
Most definitely. So the E2 is originally a visa from the Department of State, meaning it should be adjudicated in consulates and embassies around the world, U.S. embassies or consulates around the world. However, exceptionally, it can be adjudicated inside the United States. We do not recommend doing that inside the United States through USCIS because that's not their main line of training. And you will have to re-adjudicate the case once you get to a consulate. Because of COVID, sometimes we have decided otherwise, but that's a whole other story. Let's not get to that detail. They usually, when consulates are at their normal pace, are processed fairly quickly. So we're talking about 15, 20 days, sometimes 30 days of processing before a consulate or embassy. And you go to the interview and you have your visa, your decision right then. A lot of consulates do take some time to review the business plan prior to the interview, but it's a quicker process in a very broad sense. When a pandemic is not going on, of course. And the EB1-C is a process that, at least for now, this is being discussed. They do want to implement what we call premium processing fee for that process, but as of right now, as of today, it does not allow you to pay the premium processing fee to have an adjudication in 15 business days, which means it goes through regular processing. And that does not look pretty when we're talking about USCIS, and it does not help us. So we see adjudications in 10 to 14 months.
Okay.
And that's the merit. That's the merit.
Yeah.
When we talk about the green card per se, which could be either here through an adjustment of status when the person is inside the United States, or the NVC processing, ignoring the pandemic, we're talking about another 12 months. It could be concurrently filed with the merit, and that could save you some time. but let's say EB1-C could take anywhere from 12 to 14 months to be processed.
Important question coming from YouTube, and we did not mention expressly. It's coming from, oh, by the way, we are live on YouTube, so we have people watching and they send me questions here. We didn't expressly mention, but Loane, EB1-C, Brazilians can apply, correct? E2, Brazilians cannot apply. Okay.
Right. No treaty in the EB1-C. So any nationality can apply.
Okay. Okay, very good. We'll come back to this question, EB1-C versus L1A at the end. We can explore that a little bit more, but I'll save that for the end, because now we'll move into the EB5, which is very, very interesting. Mike loves that. So I'll go with Mike first for EB5. I also love the program. There's an important change coming up in the program. We'll mention that. But Mike, tell me a little about the EB5 program as a whole. How do you see the program? What are the details? What's intended for? And then we can narrow down to the details with Loane after you.
Sure. Well, the EB5 program has been around since the early 90s. And it is a very good path if the correct project is chosen for people and their investors and their families to obtain green cards in the United States. It's typically a 5 to 7 year process, given all the different application levels that one has to go through to get from the start to the finish. There's lots of requirements.
We are here, right? We're talking about this here, EB5.
That's right.
Okay.
So, so as it mentions there, the family members that apply, it's the investor, their spouse, and all their unmarried children under the age of 21, and that has proven to be a very beneficial program. The price increased in 2019 from 500,000 to 900,000, which reduced the ability of some people to invest. However, the program was at 500,000 for decades before any price increase. So the industry felt, or the service felt, that it was time to make an increase. That being said, the program has also gone through lots of different iterations, in the sense that some people have invested in projects that didn't work. Obviously, it's a lot of money to put at risk to make sure to ultimately not end up with your goal, because most of the investments are low financial return investments, because ultimate return is the immigration benefit of getting the green card for you and your family. So our focus has always been, again, on due diligence, making sure that before we put a project, we represent a project, and they're not our projects, they're projects of regional centers that sponsor and work with a developer in most cases to do a commercial real estate project. There are other projects as well, but we tend to focus on the commercial real estate side, as well as a couple of infrastructure projects. And the key is, again, making sure that there's some things in place that are going to protect the investor, making sure the investment of the EB5 investor is going to be in the proper place in the capital stack, making sure that the developer and the sponsor is going to be after the EB5 investor in preference, making sure that there are enough jobs created by the project. That's an economic formula that is dependent typically on construction spend, as well as the direct and other induced jobs that come from the economic impact of that project in the area that they're in. Doesn't require that the investor live in the same place as the project. Investor can live anywhere they want. Project can be anywhere in the United States, and it's got to generate at least 10 jobs per investor. We've represented almost 30 projects over the course of our 10-year existence, and we have 100% approval rate at this point. All the people that have applied for I-526s for their conditional green card, as well as their final removal of conditions that have reached that point, have all been approved. And again, we do that to make sure we have that success rate because of the focus that we have on who are you investing with, because ultimately this is going to be your partner when you make that investment. Is the project viable? Has the developer done this before? Those are all very strong questions that we dig to the bottom of before we make that EB5 project an opportunity for our investors. And I'll let Luani talk a little bit about it, and we can certainly talk about a little bit about our portfolio as well that we have right now.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Mike. Very important difference here. Before I move to Luani, let me summarize an important difference on one aspect about those three options. On E2 and EB1-C, the applicant needs to work on that business. Okay, guys, that person is intended to work in the business. On EB5, when you invest on regional centers, you do not need to work, or I should say, you will not work. You can leave and work anywhere you want. So you're not linked to the project. The project will perform, and the project will create the jobs on your behalf with a pool of money of several investors. That's the EB5 on regional centers, okay? There is a different EB5 where you invest on your own company and create the jobs on yourself. That's very rare. We don't recommend taking that route. We do recommend using regional centers and etc. So just to make that difference very clear, because some people might be saying, I want to invest in the US, but I don't want to work anymore. I'm about to retire. Okay, I'm about to retire in, let's say in France, let's say in Vietnam, and then I want to move to the US. I want to be a passive investor. So EB5 is what you're looking for, okay? So let me shift to Luani. Luani, from a legal perspective, when we do a EB5, what we mainly discuss is the so-called source of funds. Tell me a little bit about source of funds, what that is and how we approach that topic.
Right. So from our perspective, we receive basically all the information from the regional center on the investment per se, but we do assist and review the client source of fund, right? Like how did he earn the $900,000, for instance, plus the regional center fee? That varies on how much work we're gonna have doing the source of funds, because some people have it real easy. It's just their profit from this current fiscal year or the previous fiscal year. Some people have their source of funds through saving money for decades in their entire professional career, and they finally they reach $900,000. So our job is to understand those are legitimate. That's clean money, basically. We help the United States make sure that we're complying with the anti-money laundering rules of the country. So basically, our job is to understand that these people are not getting this money from illegal sources.
Yeah, good. And when we talk about source of funds, guys, it's not only source, it's source and tracing. That's important to understand, because sometimes people will read the regulation or read an article and say, oh, I need to talk about the source of funds, meaning I inherited this money 10 years ago. That's the source. So that's it. We ended up with the work. I just showed that I inherited the money. No, you need to show that you inherited the money 10 years ago and what you did with that money until now. So we can have the source and tracing of every dollar that you are using for your investment. and then we go down to the detail to make sure that we explain very well to the US CIS, the source, the tracing, the investment, the project, and thank God we have 100% approval rate on doing so. But we need to be very careful, right, Loan? It needs to be very detailed oriented.
We are very detailed. We feel like it's like getting a dollar bill, marking it and following it throughout the entire way until you get to the United States and to the regional center, right? To the actual investment per se. So it is a lot of work, because it's not just saying, yes, I inherited it, but where did that come from in the first place? Or did you inherit this in 2010? Then was it just there sitting and waiting and you just transferred, or did you have lots of transactions in the middle of the way? So yes, we go over all of that detail.
A lot of work, I know that. So we spoke about regional centers a lot. Like the investor needs to choose a regional center and put the money there, and the regional center will create jobs on the investor's behalf. But after all, what's a regional center? What's a project? How to choose? Mike, can you talk a little bit about your portfolio, what you're working on now, the type of project, what a regional center is, what people should be looking for? Feel free to talk about your portfolio and give some examples for us.
Sure. Well, very quickly, a regional center is an entity that's been approved by USCIS to operate within a particular area of the United States to sponsor a project that is eligible for EB5. And that will allow the direct, indirect, and induced job creation to occur. That's why you can get several hundred jobs from an investment that may only actually employ 20 people. It just depends on the industry, it depends on the location, it depends on the type of construction spend. So the regional center is an entity that does that. Some regional centers are their own developers. Some regional centers are completely independent from the developers they're working with. Some regional centers have done 15 projects, some have done one. So the key is finding a group that's experienced and that works with reputable developers. That's again what our focus is. Right now, our portfolio consists of 4 projects. One project is in Las Vegas. It's a brand new resort and casino that just opened in December. They're still finishing up some of the construction on that. It is the EB5 investment represents 9% of the total capital. The developer put in about $460 million of their own money, alongside $450 million of senior debt led by Credit Suisse. So it's a very small portion of the capital stack on the EB5 side, offering 2% per year per annum in annual return, which is on the high end of most EB5 projects. The beauty of a project like this is the sense that the project's at or near completion. So all the jobs have been created, the construction risk is gone, the financing risk is gone. So really, it's just a matter of coming into a project and you got capital risk at this point. So you have to look at the cash flows of the company, make sure that there's a viable exit strategy there, which in this case there is, based on the refinancing of a completed project, which will probably happen in the next couple of years. So that's one project. The other project we have is a project in Texas. It is an oil storage facility that also is at or near completion. That project is probably going to be, they're probably going to finalize that offering at the end of this month. So that one probably won't be available very much longer, so I won't talk much about that. The third project is a steel manufacturing facility in Arkansas, which is owned by U.S. Steel, which is a large New York Stock Exchange traded company, probably the largest steel manufacturer in the world. This one is also, again, completed in the sense that the jobs have been created. There's no financing risk. Again, low EB5 risk to the investor. It's also been approved by U.S. Immigration to that its project's considered in the national interest. So there might be an opportunity for expedited approvals of I-526, not guaranteed, possibility. The fourth project is a multifamily project in Seattle that is with an experienced, and these are all with experienced regional centers. This is a multifamily project that's been also again at or near completion, about 80% leased of the apartments, and low portion of the capital stack, 2.5% annual return to the investor, and we're looking to get as many people into these projects, because the projects, once they go to full completion, they look to wind up the offering within a reasonable period of time, because at that point, you're looking at projects that may not qualify going forward, depending on the specifics of the project. So, all these projects have gone through a ton of due diligence, extensive due diligence, so much so that our clients on that side weren't very happy with us for several weeks, and we kept asking questions and more questions and more questions. But it's what we do. We have to make sure the investor is protected. So those are our current projects right now, all at 900,000, varying annual returns. All two of the projects are exemplar approved, which means that USCIS has approved the structure and project that indicating that it qualifies for EB5. So the majority of the risk on that point is on the investor per the source of funds documentation that Luani mentioned earlier. So those are our current projects in a very quick snapshot, and happy to share more detail of those projects with anybody that's interested after this call.
Sure, and we'll put your contact information at the end so people can send you an email, ask for the material. Guys, I mentioned at the beginning that the EB5, there will be some news on EB5 at the end of this month. I don't want to take much time on this slide, but we must make this statement here. So EB5 on June 30th, okay, is set to expire. Okay, so if nothing happens by the end of this month, EB5 through regional centers will no longer exist, will no longer be available. But don't panic, because this has happened before several times. So the first bullet point here is that prior sunsets and extensions. So this has happened before. The EB5 program on regional centers, the program has faced this challenge on renewal before, and every single time it has been renewed. Okay, Mike will talk a little bit more about the expectations, but most likely that from now until the end of the month, Congress will find a solution to extend on a short or long term for the program. Okay, so we have a potential sunset on June 30th. We did have this before, and this has been managed before. Important to mention this, and important that most likely, okay, there's nothing in the law now that indicates us or in the project that there will be any impact on petitions submitted before. So if you had submitted before the petition, you will not be affected. If you submit the petition from now until the end of the month, you will not be affected. This is the general understanding about the law, the new laws. And then what will happen on June 30th, we don't know yet, but there is some guidance based on the legislature and what we are talking on Congress now. Mike, what's going on in Congress now? What the congressmen are talking about this topic? Give us an update, please.
Sure. Well, based on the latest information we have, we're on the leadership circle with the IUSA, which is the main trade association for the EB5 industry, and we're also we have strong relationships with several U.S. senators' offices that we're talking to. My partner Gene King and I have been talking with, And where we are right now is they're still trying to get the current legislation that will reauthorize the program for 5 years, and also enact some integrity provisions, which are further ways to protect investors. And the sponsoring senators on that are two very powerful senators in the United States, in the U.S. One Republican, one Democrat. There's been lots of conversations going on with lots of different senators, and also a similar bill exact same bill was introduced in the House a few weeks ago. So the real push right now is to get as many co-sponsors of the bill so they can actually get it to the floor for a vote. As with anything, it's a really hard thing to do, especially with only, what we're now at Thursday, basically next week, and maybe a couple of days of the following week are left for Congress to be in session. So it'll come down to the wire to see what happens with the current bill. There have been some I guess competing interests that have been looking for other things to be included in the bill. They're trying to talk to that group right now to try and negotiate something. So as with anything, it will probably be a last minute situation, and then we'll find out what the resolution is. But know that there's lots and lots of activity going on every single day, lots of lobbying going on. And there have been some very powerful senators, in addition to Grassley and Leahy, that are pushing for this bill to get through. So hopefully we'll know more in the next few days. But as of right now, that's what we're looking at. As Pedro said, there will be some solution. Whether it's the program will go away for a couple of months, maybe it'll be extended for a couple of months while we continue to figure this out. But we will continue to be there for all of our investors, and also when the program resumes in whatever capacity that is.
Great. And I could see several people requesting the material you mentioned about the projects. People saying, can you send me the material, the presentations? So here it is, Mike's contact information. You guys can send an email to Mike or to Mila. Okay, so it's on your screen. Write it down. There is also all the social media for Invest America down here. Okay, so I will leave some time for you to write down and send an email to Mike or Mila. Before we move to questions and answers, we are coming to the top of the hour now. We will answer all questions. We have several very interesting questions. So let me share my contact information and Loani if you have questions that are unanswered or you want to be in touch with us. Here's our emails, also the social media. Add us on your register on our social media. We share several material, webinars, and etc. Feel free to send us an email as well. Let's move to question and answers. Loani, we have very interesting ones. Let me go back to L1 and EB1-C. Oh, sorry. Let me go back to E2 first. Okay. A question here from Luciano. What's the practical difference between E2 and B1? There are several. Loani, please go to the main ones. Difference between E2 and B1.
All right, so I'm going to try to make it simple. So the B1 is the business visa you use to start your investment prior to your E2, because it will limit you to meetings, signing contracts, basically checking what you will be investing in the United States. The E2 itself is what's going to allow you to come and actually work on the day-to-day in your business. So the difference is very big, actually. It's the B1 has a handful of activities you are allowed to perform, basically on behalf of either your own foreign entity or just the Investment Act itself. So immigration officers do expect prior visits before you actually have your E2 interview under the B1 status or ESTA, right? Because the ESTA, the travel authorization, has both the B2 and the B1 activities related to it. So that's a summary of what you can do with the B1 and the difference.
Yeah. Let me follow up with Luciano. He has another question. What if I already own a working business in the US? What would be the conditions to be approved? Can I take that one? Because it's still on E2. So basically, Luciano, if you're not establishing the new business, but you already have one and wants to apply for the E2 anyway, can you do it? Yes, you can do it. You will need to discuss the very same requirements. The difference is that you have a track record of that business. When you're starting, you're promising something. You're presenting a business plan to say, listen, I will perform, allow me to work, give me an E2 to perform. When you have a working business, you will stay the same. Give me an E2, I will perform, and I have this track record of performance to show. So it's a much better E2 request when you have an existing business already, okay? With respect to EB1-C, now we're moving on the presentation. We spoke about E2, now let's go to EB1-C. Loani, a question coming from Steve. What are the differences between EB1-C and L1?
All right, so in terms of criteria, the L1 and the EB1-C, I mean the L1A specifically for managers and executives, and the EB1-C for managers and executives, they have very similar criteria to it. The main difference is the L1A is temporary, and it can be for a startup. It does not require the company to be an existing company for at least 12 months in the United States. So those are big differences. And it does not require the ability to pay like the EB1-C, like I mentioned in the presentation. But it does require the qualifying relationship between the companies and the foreign entity and the U.S. entity. It does require a qualifying relationship of the manager or executive to the foreign entity for at least 12 months prior to their transfer. And just like the EB1-C and the L1A, you're going to have to establish that on the day-to-day of the operation in the foreign entity and your proposed endeavor in the US, you will be acting under managerial or executive capacity.
Sure, correct. Just a quick question here for EB5 before I go. Somebody mentions the 500,000 and etc. Before the change of the law, it was 500,000 for regional centers and $900,000 for direct investments. Those figures went up respectively to 900K to 1.8. Correct, Mike?
Correct. Yeah, it was 500 and $1 million, and now it's now it's 900 and 1.8 million.
Okay. Still on EB1, Loani, a question from our friend and client here, João. It's coming from, he's on YouTube. His question is, if I have a Brazilian company based in Brazil, and I have a subsidiary in the US, let's say more than 1 year, important, more than 1 year, could I request transfer from Brazil to US under L1 visa?
In a very general sense, yes. If you have a qualifying relationship, remember we spoke about ownership and control while we were talking about the E2. That will have to be reviewed, right? But in a very general sense, it looks like you could have a case, but we would have to look into more detail.
Yeah. João, speaking about the 1 year and why I emphasized, if you have a subsidiary in the US that operates for less than 1 year, you are not allowed to request for the EB1-C. You must request L1A, okay? If that company is operating for more than 1 year, you can request EB1-C directly. Then you may ask yourself, but why usually, even in those scenarios, why usually I apply for L1A and only after I will apply for EB1-C? That depends on the strategy, okay, and the processing time. So everything we're talking here, guys, is on a general level, but each case is a different case, okay? And again, as Loani said, we need to go down to the details to see if your position qualifies as a managerial or executive and so forth, okay? Let's move into the EB5. Let me get one here. Can you live abroad and invest in an EB5 program? Mike, can I live abroad and invest in an EB5 program?
The simple answer is yes. However, you can't. You can live somewhere else, but you have to be in the United States for a certain period of time, or you can't be outside the United States for more than a certain period of time. And that is not just a an annual requirement. It's an annual requirement, plus there's I believe, what is it, a 3-year cumulative requirement as well. I think Luani, as the immigration, and you guys as immigration, will be able to answer that more specifically. But you don't have to be here 100% of the time, but you can't be absent for greater than, I forget the actual number of months or days, but you guys can maybe answer that better.
Sure. Go ahead, Luani.
So, well, you are requesting a green card to live in the United States, right? To reside in the United States. So there are several numbers of days that you want to look at. So leaving the U.S. for 4 consecutive months could raise a red flag, but not coming back to the United States for a period greater than 6 months will also raise an even more highlighted red flag there for the officer. You're going to have a good, I don't want to say excuse, but a good reason to leave the United States for that amount of time. There are legal remedies for that. We could request an advance parole for you to leave, we could explain to the U.S. that you have a project abroad and kind of freeze your residency, but those are discussions that we could go into further detail on, maybe a personal consult.
So sure, good. Just to answer in that question, I took that question more in a sense before investment and after investment. So before the I-526 is adjudicated and the green card is issued, you definitely can be outside the US, okay? You can be outside the US. After you have the green card, then you have all those limitations that Mike and Loani mentioned. So keep an eye on those limitations, very important topics that Loani and Mike brought up. Still speaking about EB5, a question from our friend here. Yeah, Wedja, hello. She is here with us. Very nice person and client here with us, a friend of ours. Can an L1 and a EB5 be concurrently filed, or not concurrently filed? She didn't use those words. Can they exist at the same time in parallel? So I'm working or I'm leaving on L1 and I'm also making a EB5 request and investment, etc.
I would assume that's for me, right? So
yeah,
first of all, so happy that Wedja is watching us. Second, it is possible, right? We do always analyze good faith when we're applying, so we would have to understand the specific context. But yes, because EB5 processing could take a while, and the L1 has dual intent, what we call dual intent. In a very general, broad sense, I would say yes, they can exist at the same time, but we would analyze the actual detail of the case.
Sure. Good, good. I think we answered them all. Guys, we're 10 minutes late. There are still a couple more questions here, but I encourage you guys to send to us as well. Let me go back to the presentation here. Let me share a little bit again our contact information. There we go. Our emails, feel free to send us emails also to Mike and Mila. We covered very in 1 hour. We can talk about each of those options in more than an hour. And we did the 3 of them in 1 hour, discussing very important topics, both from an immigration and an investing perspective. So we didn't mean to cover every single detail. If you want more details on us, please send us an email. We're happy to talk to you about this. Mike, thank you very much for being with us today. If you can please go ahead with your final words.
Sure, thank you as well, Pedro. It's always a pleasure. And thank you everybody for attending today. We are very interested to help you answer any questions you have about any of the visas that were mentioned today. Feel free, as they also said, to contact Mila or me. Mila is originally from Brazil and can communicate with you in Portuguese or Spanish if there's any Spanish-speaking people on here as well. And we are happy to provide you information on our EB5 projects, on our E2 consulting services, and EB1-C was also a very similar consulting practice that we have to E2. I will, we'll be updating our social media for whatever happens with the EB5 program in a couple of weeks. So please check into that if you want to know more about where the program is, as far as whether it still exists or not, which will be a big decision for our firm for sure. And we're here to answer your questions and ultimately help you along your immigration journey in partnership with Drummond Advisors. Thank you, Pedro.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike. Loani, thank you very much. Again, great job explaining hard concepts and intricate details and etc. on immigration. Great job. Thank you very much again. So your final words, please.
Well, thank you very much. So if my boss thinks I did a good job, I'm happy. Well, thanks everyone for attending.
That's even better. The audience enjoyed, so good.
Okay, that's even better. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And just like Mike, we are more than happy to assist you and receive all your questions, details, and maybe see you for a personal meeting.
Good, good. Thank you very much, Loani. And Loani does a great job. Loani and her team, they keep those social media here up to date with the most recent immigration news, and they are very there are many, okay, many news, almost daily updates on all types of issues that were going on with the pandemic, not the pandemic, visas, immigrations, and everything. So go to our website, go to our social media, because then you can be up to date with those regulations as well. Thank you, Mila. Thank you, Aline. Aline from our communication department. She's on the background, did a great job to put this webinar together again. Thank you, João Paulo, who is translating. Thank you all for your time. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope we could provide the useful information this short time here. Loani, Mike, Mila, Aline, João, thank you very much. To all of you in the audience,
Bye,
thanks
thank
a lot.
you.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye-bye.